Hi there, this is Miss DePoy, and I am reading The Egypt Game. Today we're going to be reading Chapter 10, The Return to Egypt. The trick-or-treat group was a milling mob of devils, witches, tramps, and monsters. Mr. Barkley, who always acted as if being the father of 6-year-old twin boys was almost more than he could stand, looked positively exhausted. And even Mr. Kamada's sturdy real estate salesman's smile was beginning to wilt. Outside the Casa Rosada, a black cat, a mechanical man, a little Red Riding Hood, 2 tramps, and 4 ancient Egyptians joined the already unwieldy group. They had started off up Orchard Avenue in a sprawly column when Marshall suddenly stopped and tugged at Melanie's arm. "I want a sign," he said loudly. Several of the surrounding trick-or-treaters turned to look at him, and the other 3 Egyptians stared in astonishment. Marshall had never blabbed about secrets before. "Shh," April hissed. "Not yet. I'll tell you when." "Shh, Marshall, it's a secret," Elizabeth whispered, covering his mouth with her hand. "What's the matter with you?" Melanie asked in astonishment. Marshall pushed Elizabeth's hand away. "Not a secret sign," he said. "A sign to carry." All of a sudden, Melanie laughed. "Oh," she said, "I guess he thinks we're a demonstration, like at the university. He's never been trick-or-treating before. He was too young last year. But he knows about demonstrations." Everybody laughed except Marshall. "We're not a demonstration, Marshall," Melanie explained, tugging at him to get him moving again. "We're trick-or-treating. Trick-or-treating is for candy, and demonstrations are for things like peace and freedom. It's different." Marshall relaxed and allowed himself to be pulled down the street, but he didn't look convinced. "I'm a demonstration," he said firmly. And there's a picture of our trick-or-treaters. When the crowd turned up Elm Street, where there were more good houses to visit, the Egyptians began to drop to the rear of the group, where it would be easier to get away. That meant that they were the last ones up to each home, and sometimes most of the good stuff was already taken. But they hardly noticed. They were too busy looking for an omen. At the last house, before they turned off Elm Street, the Egypt gang started up the front walk and collided with 2 other trick-or-treaters who also seemed to be hanging behind the main group. A monster in a walking pile of boxes. "Hey," the monster said, "it's Ross in February. What are you supposed to be?" The rubber monster mask completely covered the speaker's head, but the voice was familiar, and besides, the 6th grade boys were the only ones who called April February. Then the walking boxes said, "Hey man, it's a whole herd of Egyptians." He poked Marshall in the stomach and said, "Hi there, King Tut." "Okay, Mr. Wise Guy Alavar," Melanie said. "I know who you are." She turned to April with an exasperated shrug. "It's Kamada and Alavar." Ken Kamada and Toby Alavar were just about the most disgusting boys in the 6th grade, in a fascinating sort of way. They were best friends and always together, and everybody always voted for them for everything and wanted to be on their team. But not April and Melanie. April and Melanie always told each other that Ken and Toby were just ordinary boys, and it was stupid the way everybody treated them so special. April and Melanie just couldn't figure out what people saw in them. Of course, Toby had a special talent for getting people off the hook by making the teacher laugh. Just when Mrs. Granger was really building up a head of steam over something, Toby would make some little remark and Mrs. Granger would start choking and have to turn her back. Sometimes she'd try to pick things up where she left off, but all that lost momentum sure made a big difference. Ken was sort of cute in a big, blunt, cocky way. He had a clean-cut, all-American Asian look about him, and he walked with a high school swagger. Toby was thinner, with big ears that stuck out of his shaggy hair, and enormous brown eyes that were always up to something, like a pair of TV screens turned on full blast. But right now you couldn't see what either one of them really looked like at all. Ken had a man's old overcoat on over a pillow-padded hunchback, and wouldn't you know it, rubber monster hands and feet too, as well as the mask. Ken's father sold a lot of real estate, and he could afford expensive stuff like that. Toby was the box man. He had a small box over his head with a saran-wrapped covered opening shaped like a TV screen to look out through. The rest of him was covered with all sorts of other boxes, all strung together and painted black and covered with pasted-on ads out of papers and magazines. There were Alka-Seltzer and Pepto-Bismol ads on his stomach box, aspirin ads on his head box, and even a deodorant ad under his left arm. Boy, are you two in character, April said. A monster and a pile of junk. I'll have you know that I represent the new American, Toby said haughtily. Then he grinned. It was my dad's idea. He says it's a new art form he just invented. Toby's dad had been a graduate student at the university. He was also a sculptor who made statues out of all kinds of junk. An art form? April said. Well, all I can say is, don't, Toby interrupted. You just show off your ignorance. Come on, Tobe, Ken said. We're getting left behind. Yeah, you little kids ought to keep up with the group better, Toby said as he started off up the sidewalk. You're liable to get hurt. Little kids, Melanie yelled after him. Look who's talking. Marshall ran after Toby and gave him a shove on the rear of his biggest box. We're not little kids, he said. We're Egyptians. Toby swiveled his TV head around and surveyed the damage. Hey, watch it, he said. You just bent my jockey shorts ad. April and Melanie didn't believe in encouraging Toby by laughing at him, but that was too much. By the time the Egyptians got over their convulsions of giggles, Ken and Toby had disappeared around the corner, and the lady whose walk they were on was calling to ask if they wanted some candy or not. After that, Melanie suggested that maybe they better stay up with the group a little better or the fathers would notice and start watching them. But even when they were trying, it wasn't easy to catch up because their costumes were such a success. At almost every house, they had to be admired and questioned, and other members of the family had to be called to see them, particularly Elizabeth and Marshall. Everyone thought Elizabeth and Marshall were just darling and adorable, and they had to be admired and fussed over because before the Egyptians could take their candy and leave. At last, at one house, they had to wait while the man got his flash camera out to take their picture. And when they finally got away and rushed down the stairs, the big group of trick-or-treaters had completely disappeared. There they were, all alone on the dimly lit sidewalk, and it was suddenly very quiet. They ran down the block to the corner where they could look all four ways, but still there wasn't a person in sight. They were still just standing there looking around and wondering what to do when suddenly Melanie pointed at the horizon. Look, she said, a shooting star. A shooting star. Everybody repeated it in whispered unison as if they'd been rehearsed. Then everybody looked at April. She nodded. The secret omen, she said slowly, making every syllable heavy with significance. Marshall started turning around and around, smelling the air. Looking around one last time to be sure no one was watching, the girls grabbed Marshall out of his tailspin and started down the sidewalk in the direction that they had come. They scurried down 2 blocks without seeing a soul, turned the corner, and a moment later ducked into the alley that led to Egypt. If the secret and mysterious land of Egypt was fascinating in the daytime, it was doubly so at night. Dimly lit by a distant street light, 2 flashlights, and a jack-o'-lantern, it was almost too fascinating to bear. April told everyone to wait just inside the fence while she tiptoed forward and lit the cone of incense on the altar of Set and the 2 candles that stood before the goddess Isis. Then she motioned everyone forward. The great ceremony of the celebration of the return to Egypt has begun, she chanted, and all 4 Egyptians prostrated themselves before the egg crate and the bird bath. And that is the end of chapter 10.